It's what this looks like talking at me. Kind of feels something.
Somebody up there. Hey, Antonio. How you doing? That's Ambrose you're talking to right there.
How you doing?
Good to see you, man. Yes, Ambrose. Russell. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Have a seat right there. You can sit there.
Unfortunately.
How about you guys? What do you guys do?
Well, this is my boss. So.
Oh, okay.
He's got to come up with a
You
story.
really got to be lawyers on one side, your boss on the other.
I'm a tough night.
Yeah, you guys have a supervision? Or you guys...
He's the chief policeman, and I'm the deputy chief, so I oversee our investigative division, our community outreach. So kind of like Matt, who's one of the members.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ambrose R. Russell. I'm the founder and the chairman of the Inner Hero organization. Here with me today, we have our board members. A couple of them, we have Doug Knapp. He's our lawyer. We have Tom Hecker. He's one of the lawyers who make sure we're keeping our papers in check and we're doing the right thing. We have the co-chairman of the board, Keith Dean. We have the secretary of the board, Sandra Morales, and a host of other friends and invited guests that came over. Today is a great day because one of the main goals of the Inner Hero organization is to see the community become better. And I believe we as a community and we as this organization, one of the main things we strive to do is to build a relationship. So we stay in as the middleman, the bridge that people can cross over. But we believe the only way we can work together, we have to start communicating better and we have to listen to one another more. So this barbershop discussion today, I will stress again, it's nothing political. So if you're affiliating with any political parties, we ask you in this discussion, leave wherever you had with your political discourse outside. We are about to do the community business today and to discuss ways and means how we can better our community. We have the chief of Brooklyn Park, we have the deputy chief of Brooklyn Park, we have the liaison officer of Brooklyn Park, and we have the liaison officer, I think, for Hennepin County, and a couple of other people who we are invited to this occasion. So once again, feel free. Let us work together. Let us have a positive conversation that we can move our community forward for the better of this present generation and the next generation to come. Thank you and welcome again.
Thank you.
So the mic is open here for discussion, concern, just to start with anybody. Whatever question and whatever concern you have that you think the community and the police need to work together that we can improve moving forward from now, going forward for this generation, because a lot of times the change that we're looking for is not just for us. We can establish the change and we pass it on to the next generation to come. So the floor is open.
Hey, I want to say something. Thanks, Ambrose. I don't have a concern or a question, but I talked to Ambrose about an idea, and it actually came out of the whole Colin Kaepernick thing. And I thought, I think the NFL missed a prime opportunity to try to bring communities of color and police officers together rather than fighting how they're protesting. How about attacking the actual problem? And I thought the NFL already has a program in place called like Chefs of the NFL or Food of the NFL. I forget what they actually call it, but Taste of the NFL. And I thought, what a great idea would have been had they sponsored in each NFL city, including the Twin Cities here, where chefs and people donated food and police officers and members of the community could get together at schools or churches and make meals together and sit down and eat them so they would get to know each other. Because I've always felt like if you could kind of break bread together, I think it builds trust, and it lets you get to know people on a different level, and you have different conversations over food sometimes, and it's more of a community sense. And I thought, well, maybe we should suggest this to the NFL, but I thought maybe what we should do first is try to build, in a small community like this, a sample of that. And if we could get a couple sponsors to do it, maybe this is the community to do it in. I don't know, or somewhere around here. And if we can show that it can be done, and people will actually come out, and we can get the community to come out, and the police officers to come out, I think it might be a great start of something we could build off of to bridge that gap. It's just an idea, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. That's... and I'm not sure if you were looking for other complaints. I don't have any complaints. I just wanted to throw that in there.
So yeah, it's just idea. Maybe the chief got something to say to that.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. The NFL did miss an opportunity there, I think, but why we appreciate conversations like this is the reason that I think that they missed the mark with the Colin Kaepernick incident or incidences was because it became political. And as soon as politics become involved, everybody runs for the hills, right? They don't want anything to do with it. So I'm certainly open to having some kind of event. Now, reaching out to the NFL in the future, I don't know how successful that would be, but it's certainly something that can be tried. I just, for the last several years, whenever you watch these channels, well, it's switched on me now, but these politically charged channels, I was just sharing with this gentleman here that it seems like it's two different worlds. You have an issue that occurs, and you watch channel 34, and you get one view, and then you turn to channel 26, and you get a completely different view. So I think issues like Colin Kaepernick get into that realm pretty quickly, and then everybody doesn't want anything to do with it. So, great idea, and we've had that discussion. I've actually heard that discussion on national TV about the issue. The issue is not Colin Kaepernick. The issue is what Colin Kaepernick is saying is an issue, right? We never got that far. So,
are there local restaurants or chefs that we could call on in the Brooklyn Park area that might donate, or other corporations that might, or businesses that might donate to a cause like that? Because I think there would be some fundraising involved before we got it done. But so I don't have a good sense of this community because I don't live or work up here very well. But I'm not sure if there are business leaders and stuff that we might be able to call on to do something.
I think there are, and what I would offer, Paula could probably elaborate on this too, but we can almost do a joint Brooklands thing, like a Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, because we share so many of the same issues. The populations are the same. We do a lot of work with them together. So they have Paula's counterpart in Brooklyn Center that could help us with that. When it comes to hosting community events or fundraising, I heard Mark talking to someone here earlier about, I think it was Ambrose, that these events are much better attended and the conversations are more genuine when the meeting is called by the community and not the police. Because what I heard him saying is absolutely accurate. When we issue an invitation to the community to come talk to us about issues, whatever, I can usually predict about 80% of the people that are going to be there. With a meeting like this, put together by the community, I have no idea what the issues are going to be at. I have no idea who's going to be here. So when it comes to planning an event like that, I think from the community's perspective, if the community sets it up, you have much more success than if the government sets it up.
Any other person can add to that?
Actually, mine is more of a question, and that is, maybe you can kind of give us an overview of some of the initiatives that are already in place with the police community to engage with the citizens of the community to help build that bridge that I think Inner Hero is trying to broaden and create, so that there is, I guess, a better interaction and understanding and overall positive impact on both the police side as well as the community side?
I'll let Mark start. I think we'll probably parrot each other when we talk, and then we can just fill in if we miss something.
First, I want to say thank you. In the conversation we had earlier that the chief was referring to, Enevoldson, I was thanking him because it is really authentic when it comes from leadership in our community that sets up these meetings, and we walk away feeling so much more fulfilled that we had the conversation that the community wanted to have. When we set up the meetings, it's not as good as this. So thank you for your leadership in this, and we hope that it continues on in the future. You know, we have a ton of initiatives. So my job in the police department is oversee our investigative division, but it's also to oversee our community outreach. That's a big part. So Deputy Chief of Police, that's my 2 assignments. And if you think about it, that's a pretty big assignment to literally give the Deputy Chief to oversee all community engagement. The reason I tell you that is because we really value it that much that we assign it to Deputy Chief to oversee and orchestrate. We have, and I'll go into some of the examples that you asked specifically. So, but before I tell you about these individual events, I want to kind of explain how my philosophy is on what community outreach and community engagement looks like. Early on, we just started trying to do programs, you know, play basketball, cops and kids fishing, these things that I will elaborate, and they're extensive. The list goes on, and we'll probably forget a lot of them. But we try to, come on out, don't be scared. Give him a mic. The idea was we can't just have a community engagement officer, which we do, but the idea wasn't that we have a community engagement officer who goes to picnics, who goes and fishes with cops, who does these events with kids and different populations in our community. The idea was that we, as a culture, teach our police department, the whole police department, from the top to the bottom, that we value the community outreach. We value building relationships with the community, and we value policing with the community. So it's more of an ideology of embedded into everything that we do. And to do that, we can't just have one officer playing with kids. We got to have police officers at every interaction, at every traffic stop, every interaction that value the same thing that we're trained upon them, which is we value community engagement, partnering with our community. So to do that, you'll see a lot of our programs are all over the place. So for example, one of the things that we're different in our school resource officers is our school resource officers engage kids in school, not just there to protect security. That's important. We provide security. But we also go into classrooms and teach and talk with kids and have conversations just like this in our schools, which is very exciting. We also have cops and kids fishing, which we target, I use that term loosely, but throughout the year we target at-risk youth. So kids that we really feel need the interaction, the mentorship. And then once a year we collect them, gather them all up at a day event at our city campus, and we go fishing and we have food. And those are cops usually 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, and they go fishing. And there's no agenda. It's just a conversation and a time to mentor. When we have talk about our police officers, that's the face of our community. And so some of the things we've done with our police officers is every squad car right now driving out there, in the back of that squad car is some items called, it's a program called Play Safe, Stay Safe. And what you'll see is basketballs that have our logo on them. Chalk, so chalk for kids to write, have our logo on them. Frisbees, hula hoops, toys that we got donated from community partners that we've branded with our name on it. And we use that as a mechanism to give still, if we see kids, an officer can open up the trunk, hand them a basketball, and shoot a little hoops with them. They can draw some stuff on the sidewalk. And it's not about just us putting out the toy or the chalk. It's about us creating that moment in time where we can engage and build a relationship with that person, where for the first time that kid sees that officer a little bit different than just the uniform. They see him in a perspective of a human being interacting with the toy or whatnot. We had a huge initiative this summer with candy bars. Walmart gave us 7,000 candy bars. We made national news on it. And we took those candy bars and we wrapped them with our brand on them, and we put them in our squad cars. And so we kind of became like the ice cream man here when we pulled in some apartment complexes, because kids would run out to our squad cars. I will tell you, in 24 years of policing, some of our most challenged apartment complexes, I've never pulled into one and had the kids run to the police car. They've only run away from the police car, just because even if they weren't doing anything wrong, to be honest with you, they're scared. They're scared of the police, what they heard they might do, what they might ask them, and they want nothing to do with them. And we had, for the first time this year, mostly because we handed out candy bars, kids running to the squad cars begging for a candy bar. And we gave them one. You know, why wouldn't we? But it wasn't about getting the candy bar. It was about that moment in time that we were able to talk to that kid, and that for the first time that kid seen an officer, not as a threat, not that he was being targeted, not that we were there to discipline them or question them. We seen them just to build a relationship. And so, and that list goes on, and I'll let the chief elaborate, but we have many similar programs. Again, with the idea, and I told Matt this the first day that I appointed him to his position, is I'm not hiring Matt to teach or to go out in the community and have a picnic. We put Matt where he is to teach the organization how to go have a picnic with the community so that we all do it. And I'll let Craig elaborate if he wants to.
Just two quick things I want to touch on. One is the evolution of our community outreach in and of itself. So, as you know, Brooklyn Park is 52% people of color, 20-some% of those are foreign-born. So we really saw the influx of immigrants coming to the city of Brooklyn Park going back to about 2005. And we really ran into trouble between their culture and police culture. Traffic stops, loud parties, all those kinds of things. That was the birth of Paula's position. It goes all the way back to 2005. Well, we're 13 years later now, and we've learned that those issues, we're on a second generation of folks living in Brooklyn Park, so those issues really aren't popping up like they used to. So we've really morphed Paula's position and the work that she does with the county more on police-community relations in general. Not necessarily with the immigrant population, but with individuals of color in general. And then secondly, Antonio will get all upset if I don't bring this up, but going back to 2014, his position in the city of Brooklyn Park is he's our liaison to the national initiative called Cities United, if anybody's familiar with that. It's an initiative that was started back in 2014 by the mayor of New Orleans and the mayor of Philadelphia. And the goal of Cities United is to reduce violent acts in the African American community specifically, reduce that by 50% by the year 2025. Do I got that right? Yep. So we've been doing this work. That's Anthony's work. Where it's at right now is we're creating what's called a roadmap for safety for the community, and he's going to submit that to the national group to get approved, and what will come out of that is changes to our work and work across the board. What's really unique about Cities United is they're saying some of these issues are not just police issues. Police can't solve some of these issues on their own. We're talking about the schools, we're talking about mental health, we're talking about all kinds of other issues that the police need help with. So I just want to touch on those two quickly to kind of share how we've morphed as things have changed.
Before I pass the mic, I just wanted to say something. Part of the initiative effort that you guys talk about, Chief and Deputy Chief, is on our agenda for next year, and we already launched this in Richfield. We should be starting it soon, hopefully next month. One of the initiatives we came up with is to build the relationship between the present generation moving forward, because part of the things that we observe is that a lot of older folks have had their experience, and their experience they try to bring it to the present generation. So you have not gone through, but you inherited. So what we want to do, we want to have them have their own personal experience. So if you're 8, 10, 15 years old, you should have your time with the police officer. So your mom or your dad experience is way different from your experience. So one of the things we want to do is we're launching a campaign called the Police Student Lunch Time. So we have police officer come in at a certain time of the month based on the arrangement with the school and the police department that we sit and eat lunch. Go out at the playground, push the kid, give a kid a hug, talk with them for 2-3 minutes. Now that relationship and that perception start to change, because at the dining table, mom and dad always talk about the police being bad. But you have your personal experience, so now you can dissect between both. You get to realize, oh, mom told me that in 2018 or 2015, the cop hit her in the head. True, that have happened, but can we take the positive action to notice that it happened in the past, or can we move forward? So the kids have their own experience instead of living the parents' experience.
Hi everybody, how's everybody doing? Good. My name is Anthony Taylor, and I am the African American Community Specialist for the City of Minneapolis. But I am a Brooklyn Park resident, so I want to be clear, I'm not here on official business, right? I'm here because I'm a community member, so I want to be able to say that first and foremost. Second thing I want to be able to say is, this is a barbershop conversation, so I need some conversation, right? Barbershop conversation, the barbershop is a sanctuary in the African American community, right? So barbershop conversations that is lively and people are talking. So I really want to hear some of the community people talk about that, because we are in a barbershop, right? So this is a barbershop conversation. Let's see we make that happen. Secondly, or thirdly, actually, a lot of my work is around engagement. I work in the community. I also work with our elected officials, but I also work with the police department. Mayor Fry in the city of Minneapolis, one of his biggest initiatives is around community police relations, right? It's really, really one of the hot button issues in the city of Minneapolis, besides a number of different things. One of them is housing. But when we're talking about police, when we're talking about community relations, my job is to really make sure how we connect folks from the city to the government. So we're talking about police relations. We're talking about initiatives. I've talked to many people in our police department on what that looks like, right? What does authentic engagement look like within the community? A lot of times there's a lot of different ideas. This is what I want to put in the space, and I need people to kind of talk about this as well, is that when you're talking about the African American community specifically, that's who I am, that's who I work with, right? Engagement looks different because what has to be addressed first and foremost is the historical trauma, right, that the police and the African American community have, right? Listen, when I say all of this stuff, I'm not here to blame anybody. Ambrose put it on the table. This is not politics. This is not anything about that. It's about historically the relationship between the African American community and the police department all over the country. So I think when you talk about engaging, you have to be able to have some of those difficult conversations, right? You have to be able to have those difficult conversations. Minneapolis does coffee with a cop, right? Minneapolis does bicycles with cops. They do a lot of those different things, but yet the heart of the issue is the healing that needs to happen, or at least the conversation about police and the community. So I want to put in the space about thinking about having those difficult conversations and being able to sit in those spaces, whatever initiative that you have, because that will always be the underlying issue. You may pass me out a bike to my son, I still got issues from 20 years ago. Matter of fact, my father has issues 50 years ago, right? We have to understand too, even when you work with those children, and you work with students, and you take them places and everything else, they go back home, and they listen to those conversations that their parents are having, right? So the relationship is important to build, but if you're at the kitchen table and you're eating dinner and your dad or your mom is talking about things that happen, and trauma, remember, is cumulative and it's collective. Does that make sense? It's collective and it's cumulative, so the trauma that people feel may not even be their own. So I just want to put that out there because I think it's important not to forget about the heart of the issue when you're talking about engaging communities. Now, these conversations will be tough. Let's be honest, right? These are not going to be easy conversations. It's not going to be a lot of kumbaya in that space. But two things that you got to remember when you're talking about, I'm talking specifically about the African American community, right? One is that if you sit in those spaces enough, that trust will come, right? That trust will come if you sit in those spaces and you're authentic about what you're saying. And a lot of times it's just about listening, right? I think a lot of times when people do engagement in all departments and all type of businesses, sometimes people forget about asking folks what they want, right? Asking people what they need. I always want to make sure that I put that out there, because if you change the framework just a little bit, you'll be able to get to some of the heart of those issues, and they'll be able to talk to you, and then trust, and how that builds community. So I just want to put that into space. And I want people to talk. This is the barbershop. This don't seem like the barbershop to me. I'm saying it now. Right?
So the mic is available. Who wants?
I just have a follow-up question to that. So that you mentioned a coffee with the cops. Is that designed to have those tough conversations at those coffee?
It's not designed to have those tough conversations. It's just a different level of engagement. It's a different level of engagement because what they do is what we do. I say they. Well, what they do, because I'm a citizen. What they do is they're engaging those folks who are always at those coffee shops, right? So what happens is they're at McDonald's most of the time, right? They have coffee all over the city, and it's promoted through Facebook, through all the social media that will be there, but it's just a different level of conversation. Those difficult ones aren't happening at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, right? But it's for the cops to be able to show that they at least are starting to take those steps. Those difficult conversations come when you think about engaging, because you're going to engage folks after work, right? When the kids are in bed, that's when people are available. A lot of times people aren't available to have those tough conversations at 6:30. I haven't had a tough conversation at 6:30 since I was married, right? And I wasn't even married, so I'll tell you that, right? So I don't have those difficult conversations at 7 o'clock in the morning. You get what I'm saying? But it's a different level. I just want to push people to think about what does that next step take to build trust. Even our immigrant families have those issues, and they may not have them here, but they've had them elsewhere. They've had other family members that had those issues. Right? Those conversations have to happen, because what's going to happen is that you're going to put a Band-Aid on the wound, right? And once that Band-Aid is off, then what happens? People start to dump about the things that they feel is important to them. Listen, social media and media in general, one of the things that African American people hate is when the narrative gets shifted. So you can talk about Colin Kaepernick, right? Absolutely the NFL missed the opportunity to address Colin Kaepernick. The fact is that black folks are mad because the narrative has shifted from police brutality to patriotism. That's why black folks are upset. They're not upset about the NFL. They're about the collective narrative that has been shifted and hijacked over the years. You're talking about historically, even with Black Lives Matter being compared to the Black Panther Party. Right? The Black Panther Party narrative was shifted to dudes, black folks with guns killing. You look at the 60s, who was killing people? Right? Who was doing the killing in the 60s? It wasn't the Black Panthers. Talk to me, Shelby. It wasn't the Black Panthers who were murdering folks, but that was the narrative that was shifted. And don't want to talk about the positive things, and I'll say this, I know I've been on the mic a lot. When the story gets changed, black folks get mad, and then our free breakfast program was designed by who? The Black Panthers. And they never get credit for that, but they looked at it as a militant group carrying guns, terrorizing neighborhoods. So it's about the narrative shift in the community that makes folks mad. And I guarantee you, folks want to talk about that. Folks want to talk about that. They do. They may not say it now, but it's on their mind. So I'm going to pass the mic.
Anybody with a question or concern? Based on what did this? Okay, that's the owner of the shop.
A couple of things that some of the barbers and I spoke about and that they wanted me to ask about was like whether Brooklyn Park has ride-along programs and whatnot like some other cities do. We're not sure. Do you guys have the ride-along program? They said that's a way to kind of bridge the gap. Whether it's teenagers or elders or anybody that'll just kind of see what the cops do day in and day out and whatnot. You guys have that program?
We do.
How well is it working?
Absolutely. Well, it's not working really well because the only people that want to ride along is students from our local law enforcement program that's here in town. So we did have to kind of reel that in because they would kick out 500-600 students in a quarter, and they all would come to Brooklyn Park and ride along, and we just couldn't take that. But what we do have is a ride-along program for our community members that are on a case-by-case basis. If you want to ride along, anybody in this room, you take my card, I'll get you in a squad car. We want you to. I will be honest with you, many times I've been very disappointed in having these hard conversations with community members, and I want to get them in a car. I want to put them in a squad car to understand, see what goes on, because so many times the vision that they have of what they think the police are actually doing out there and what the police really are doing out there are completely two separate things. And too many times people don't take us up on that. Don't take me up on that, about getting in that car and going out there and just experience. Have a conversation one-on-one with that officer driving. And I think it's enlightening for anybody here that wants to do that. I encourage it. So, yes, we have it. I just think it's way underutilized.
Let me just share a little bit about frustration, at least from our perspective, when it comes to building those relationships and having the difficult conversations. One thing that we're constantly battling or fighting is we can have these meetings and it can be undone by one story on there, right? Or social media, the new greatest instant information, right? People will post something on social media 25 seconds after it happens, and community members have convinced themselves that's actually what happened and those are the facts. Be damned what we say 2 hours later. Their mind has been made up. The other dynamic that I know Matt would share, and we've experienced over years, is ultimately he'll build a relationship with members in the community. And pretty soon, he's okay. Matt's pretty cool. I like Matt the cop. As soon as this shows up, it doesn't matter what Matt did, right? So that's the struggle of trying to humanize 108 police officers within an organization. It's difficult. And the other battle that we're fighting is this constant negative impression of police based upon something that could have happened halfway across the country. I mean, when in the past have you seen our local newspaper publicize a shooting that happened in Georgia, right? It's front page news here if there's an officer involved shooting somewhere else across the country, right? And we get held responsible for that. And sometimes that's tough for us. I can't give you a narrative of what happened in Georgia, but because I can't give you a narrative, that must mean that everything's the same here. So that's just an experience that we have with that. I don't know how Minneapolis is tackling some of those issues, but
let's keep it Brooklyn Park.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm a resident.
Sorry, resident.
Microphone.
We have an hour, so this discussion is basically geared towards coming up with ways and means how we can move our community forward. And I believe everybody here should have a question or a concern, because discussing in a group, it causes us to move forward. We come up with ideas, we come up with better options, and we work together, starting with communication. So the communication piece that we are speaking about, it starts here today. I would prefer that everybody chip in with something.
Let me say something. I think I've done a ride along.
This is the consulate of the Liberia Embassy in Minnesota.
Do we have to call you anything special, like Your Excellency or anything?
Yes.
Your Excellency, Jackson George?
Yeah. I earned that though. But I've done the ride along, and I think it's an experience. And I would say everybody in this room should please try to do one. When you're in the squad car and you get all these calls, that night when I did that, it was very frustrating for me, because we'll be in this direction and we get another call, we're supposed to be going that way, and so it's a lot of work that police put into these calls. And some of the calls were basic calls that, but they attend to all of these calls, so it gave me a different perspective, just riding in the squad car and understanding the work that they do. It's something that we all should do. It gives you an idea as to how on a Saturday or on a beat, how they function and other things. I think the police relationship with the community is paramount, especially when the leaders in the community are working with the police, and we can be able to have a frank conversation, an honest conversation as to what's going on, and so it helps. So I would encourage people here to do that.
I'm going to piggyback on Resident Anthony's statement about community relations. Let me throw out a question, okay? Here's my question. We've done some implicit bias training and other things in the police department to try to acknowledge the history so that our cops know about the history as well. That doesn't mean it solves the history or they have a true understanding, because a lot of them look like me, right? The question I've always had is, what does the community want the police to do now? Are there still going to be use of force incidences involving the Brooklyn Park Police Department? Yep, there are. Are there still going to be times when officers potentially here in this state, across this country, use deadly force against someone that's armed or unarmed? What does the community want from their police? To simply say, don't ever use force again, it's not realistic. To say, don't ever have a police officer pull their gun again, it's not realistic. I mean, I've heard movements out there about we should disarm the police, we should abolish the police, issues like that. So I'm trying to wrap my brain around what next. So let's just say we understand the historical context. We've developed trusting relationships with one another. What would you tell the police? What do you want from us differently?
Water. So handle it. Water. That's no water. We ain't put mic. Okay. She wants to grab that one. Oh, you have ours. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm a resident in Brooklyn Park. A little building right over behind us that I pastor that church there. I'm also work in the Robbinsdale area school district. The question that you ask is, what would you like? For me, as a person who does not practice any crime, but still randomly stop for no reason, still just check for no reason, I'd like to be able to drive home with my family or even by myself without just being pulled over for no reason. That's what I would like, especially when I go to work and I'm having discussions and teaching other staff members about how to do certain things as it relates to equity and equitable practices. And then when I tell them my story, and they don't look like me. They look at me like, you're just making that up, Mr. Shelby. And I'm telling them the same thing you're asking us. Ride home with me. Maybe I won't get stopped in. But a brother's getting pulled over for no reason. And I'm saying, I'm probably one of the last persons that's going to commit a crime. But because I'm a nice-sized black man, because when I get pulled up, where are you heading? I live out here. Did you just run my plates? And so, you're asking, what do we want? I want just people to be treated right. I want to be able to go to work and have conversations with my colleagues that don't look like me and not have the opposite testimonial that I'm being looked at different. I'm being pulled over. Whose car are you driving? What do you mean, whose car? I go to work every day. I'm a family man. So for me, I can't speak for everybody else. That's what I would like, to be treated fair.
That's cool, yeah.
So the chief going to answer that question. You have something to say,
Hello, everybody. You asked a question, what would we like? I had an experience, I live out there in Ramsey. I had an experience with my kids in the car, and I got pulled over. When I stopped, the officer told me, I'm looking for a drunk driver. I don't think you are one. I don't drink. But why did I get pulled over? We don't want that. We want people to see us as parents, as leaders in our communities, as workers. We just want to live like community people. We want to be respected in our community. I don't want, because my kids know I don't drink, and you asking me, I'm looking for a drunk driver. Make my kids to start laughing. Oh, she don't even drink. I don't think they needed to answer that question. The second thing is, you said, what do we want? Do we want the police to not carry a gun? Or we actually would like the police to use a lesser punishment when they pull people over, when they want to get to people. We hate to see our people dying. That's something that we really don't want. If the police can also communicate or have a training session with other police in the community, you can go to Ramsey or Noka. I mean, just what you're doing here, encourage the other communities to do that. Because, you know, with this, they will also know who we are in the communities too. So we don't want to get killed.
I would like to see a lot more, basically, I know a lot of students that's doing criminal justice, and as well as a lot of adults that doing security work, to work more with y'all. Especially, you know, we are like about 40,000 deep, and majority of police do not know us or what we eat daily or something like that, but majority of those who are going to criminal justice and trying to help refund the Brooklyn Park, I would like to see more of us in your system, in the sense of, like you said, a ride along or a day where you can just bring a couple of students, and then, you know, sit along, see what's going on, how do you resolve some problems, especially when it comes down to Brooklyn Park. That's what I would love to see.
Yeah, so as far as diversifying our police force, that's something we've been hearing since the demographics of the city of Brooklyn Park has begun to change. That I don't see anybody out there in the uniform that you have that looks like me or has my experiences. So we created I'm not going to get into like a super long explanation because I want to hear more from you than you need to hear from me, but we created a cadet program, which is basically we recruit students, diverse students, into the police department. We pay them like $20 an hour. They work 20 hours a week. But as soon as they come in the door, they sign a contract that once they successfully complete their schooling, they become a Brooklyn Park police officer. And it's a minimum commitment of 18 months. We'd like to make it longer, but we know with millennials, sometimes 18 months is doing pretty darn good to keep them doing that particular job. So I have to be honest with you, early on we were having very limited success in recruiting those that we wanted to get into the cadet program. And a community member once told me, going to Ambrose's point earlier, is you guys are doing it all wrong. You need to go find the kids when they're young and get the kids to at least understand law enforcement and see if they have any interest, right? Us paying for school is nice for mom and dad, but the kid doesn't, okay, great, you're paying for my school, right? So we're intentional on having our school resource officers and our patrol officers actually identify kids that were juniors and seniors in high school to see if they have an interest in law enforcement. Our last cadet hiring process, we had probably the best pool of candidates that we've ever had. In fact, we had more candidates than we had positions open at the time. So I'm hopeful that this new recruitment priority is going to be successful, because before we did your standard what government does. We sent out a posting that said we're hiring cadets, and we just hoped the right people showed up. But we learned through the community that that's not working. You need to go find these kids and get them interested in law enforcement before they get out of high school and go find something else to do.
My name is Rudolph Kanga. I'm a resident of Brooklyn Park. I'm an owner of Fitness 99, located right here next door. My question is based on immigration, because I realized that I got to understand that Brooklyn Park has the right to hold anyone who are asking for the immigrant status. Do you guys have that?
No. I spent personally, Imam can speak to this, Jackson can probably speak to this a little bit. When those executive orders were passed in the start of 2017, we got a lot of those questions. That's illegal to do what you just said, right? What is in federal law, it says that we must not have a policy in place that says we would not, quote unquote, cooperate with immigrations and custom enforcement. That aside, our current policy has that in there that I can't prohibit you from communicating with federal authorities, but our standard operating procedure is that we do not work with ICE. The only way ICE would know if we have someone in custody or that we've had contact with somebody that they may want to deal with would be somebody that we have to fingerprint. They've already been arrested for a crime, and it's a crime that requires them to be fingerprinted. Those fingerprints go to the state and the federal government. That's the only way we potentially would know. And I could go on probably for another 45 minutes about our role in immigration, but I just share with you that no, we don't do that.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you for all that you do for us when we are sleeping. We all go to sleep because you don't sleep. So thank you for that.
That's neither of us, trust me.
Yeah, I'm out there once in a while. I think it was like 2016. I was invited to Virginia by Virginia Center for Police Innovation, and this is an institution hired by the federal government to just talk about and bring in people to talk about police and community relationships. And I went into this meeting. They invited me, and I was the only non-law enforcement in the room. They brought people from across the country, from all the agencies, whether it is CIA, FBI, police, sheriffs, and highway patrol. All these people came in the room. One of the things that I remember I suggested is that in order for us to build a relationship, here we are today. We have the chiefs of the police in the room. We have to change this. The way to change this is to bring the guys actually in the street.
They sit with us and we talk to them. They will understand us better. It will reduce the burden because you are answering all these questions. You are not the one, you are not the patrol officers. Those guys in the street, they need to be in the room and hear the people expressing concerns. You know, some of the concerns we have are completely out of ignorance. We don't know what you do.
So if we don't know what you do, we assume. And don't blame us for assuming. So that's one. I think this is very key to the success of the job that you do.
What we want? We want maximum security for all of us. I would never suggest that you should not carry a gun because you need to be protected in order to protect me. You should carry a gun. Okay? You should carry the gun.
How do you, if somebody else, everybody get going in the country, how can you go to stop the guy who has a gun from shooting somebody else?
You have to have a gun. You should have a gun. But guess what? The gun you have, and I said this to them, I told them, I said, if I say something, you will not hold it against me. They said, quiet, Imam. Some of the problem we have is not from the police, and not from us, from the politicians.
And I told them, okay, we give you the gun. All of us here, the civilian authority, we are the one, the city mayor, the mayors, and they give you the gun.
The purpose of that gun is to protect us. When there's mistake, whether mistake or deliberate action on the part of any police, we should be able to say. But guess what? As soon as we say, they say, this group, they are against the police. Either it's the president who's saying it, or senator, or we cannot do this.
Because they are dividing the people. We have right to say if you do something wrong, you are accountable to us.
Yeah, you should be accountable to us. And that's why it has been misunderstood in this country to the point where you cannot talk about this. They will brand you as someone anti-police.
I don't think our community is anti-police. But this is fact. So we see that every day. So we love police. Even the people sometimes who condemn
the police, when something happens, who call the police? How?
We call the police. So we love the police because police is the only one that can come between the wrongdoers and separate us. Like Jackson was saying, we make unnecessary calls. One time I was surprised police told us that they can receive more than 50,000 calls. Hey, how do you answer all these calls? How do you respond to all these calls? How many manpower you have?
And so we want to build a relationship with the police that when we see you, we should be happy to see our police officer wave to you or wave to us. But when we see you, we try to run from you. We can do much better than this, you know? So I think this type of meetings, and sometimes
bringing your officers in, it will help us like what you're telling us, a lot of people don't know. Some people leave from here today well informed. We become goodwill ambassadors for you.
There are certain places we can be, you can be there. Police can be everywhere. We can be in some places you can be. We should be able to say, you know what? The police is doing this because of this. Okay? And then lastly, I'm not speaking for you,
but I'm not talking about unnecessary pullovers. But I don't know what the intricacies are. But because sometimes at random they can do these things.
It happens to almost everybody. But if we can minimize the unnecessary one, like what happened to the sister, or like the brother who owned the car, it is the approach also that can make people angry. I will not get angry because
I get pulled over. But sometimes what will come from the person who stopped you can make people angry also. And sometimes also what comes from us because they stop us can make them angry too. Police too is human being, and you understand? And so let us build
our relationship based on genuine foundation. That I can approach you when I leave from here, I'm not worried that you're going to send your man to pull me over. I'm just saying something. Hey, you understand? So thank you for coming and explaining all this to us. At least we'll leave with our minds clear. For you to ask that question is very, what do you want from us? We want a relationship. We want a relationship.
Hi, my name is Paris. I'm a resident in Brooklyn Park. So my question is in relation to policies and procedures. Is there any engagement or inclusion of community residents in the development of policies and procedures?
Yes. There's two different groups. Not necessarily publishing it in a paper to get feedback from the community. What we do have is specific groups that we reach out to. One being our Multicultural Advisory Committee, which is a group that Paul has put together. And then citywide we have our Human Rights Commission. So Mark and others have taken several of our policies, the most recent being our community engagement policy, to them to see what you think. Sometimes we can make changes based upon that feedback, sometimes we can't, because it's case law or whatever the case might be, but at least we get the chance to explain that. I think the policy that got the most community feedback was probably our body camera policy. So we started wearing body cameras in early 2016. So prior to that we had 3 or 4 different community meetings, because what the community really didn't understand at that point when we put those on was that everything that's recorded on here that's not criminal is completely public, because the community was demanding that the police put on body cameras. Well, when I explained that to them, you could see in the room everybody just went like, oh, wait a second. So you're saying if you come to my house and there's not a crime, my neighbor can come get that body cam video the next day? Yeah, that's exactly what we're saying. So that one got a lot of interest and a lot of feedback. Luckily, the legislature stepped in and made some changes to that, the classification of that data, which I think has made the community feel better about that. So depending upon the particular issue or where the community's at, our immigration policy was on our website, I think still is. That's been on the website for almost 2 years. Got a lot of feedback on that, made some changes that we were quasi-comfortable with, but made people feel better. Sometimes it was infringing on that federal statute that I alluded to. So some changes we couldn't make, some changes we clearly did. And if I can just touch on Imam's comments, he usually has 4 or 5 things at a time, so I'm going to grab the one in the middle. The one in the middle, we've had this conversation at the police department a lot about the current process that's in place of revolving around officer-involved shootings. The community doesn't like. But the response to that is to picket or protest police departments, or where they should just naturally go is see if you can get that process changed. If you don't like the process, challenge the process, because we just go through the process when we get involved potentially in one of those instances. So that conversation should be had at a much larger level. We would have our input, clearly, on the process, as well as the community. And maybe there's room there to make a compromise or make a process better that goes back to that accountability issue that you were talking about.
First of all, I thank you for holding this event tonight. Again, my name is Antonio Smith, and I'm the city lead for Cities United and My Brother's Keeper here in the city of Brooklyn Park. I've heard some comments around relationship, and I think that might be the key. I think that's why we're here, is to figure out a way where we can start to build a relationship between the police department, community organizations, and just residents in general. Okay, so I guess the next step is, how do we develop the rapport? It's through work. Okay, and I'm saying that because I just so happen to be at a point now where I'm working with a bunch of folks within the city of Brooklyn Park and community organizations and residents, where we're putting together a comprehensive public safety plan, and it aligns with what we're talking about here tonight. You know, it's really about, what are we going to do next? What can we do together? And I think we have a number of things that are going on, at least from the Cities United standpoint. We have a youth cohort where we're looking at young people from 12 to 20 years old, and we're trying to figure out, how can we get them to graduate on time? You know, we're trying to figure out, how can we keep them, how can we give them the strength or the interest within themselves so that they can do what they want to do in terms of getting a job or you know, going through school and being successful in our community. So what I'm trying to get at is, you know, I'd love to be able to talk with anyone, and I've given my information to the secretary here about how we can connect in the future, because I see this event as tonight as something that's it's a barbershop conversation, you know, but I think it's important, and we need to be doing more of it. Not only this, but in terms of work, so that we can work with the police, invite them to participate in some of the things that we're doing, so that we can get to know them as people rather than just a uniform or a badge. So that's what I would put out there.
Hi, my name is Cici Goya. I'm a resident of Brooklyn Park, and I'm also running for Osceola School Board. I'm really happy about the conversation we're having. I think these are things that should be happening, should have been happening a long time ago. I was out canvassing quite recently with, my dad flew here from Texas, and we're out canvassing in Brooklyn Park, and